Hello and welcome to Fierce Fabulous Fridays, brought to you by Girls Who Print. My name is Deborah Korn, girl number one at Girls Who Print. And today we have a really special presentation from an amazing woman that I met a few years ago. I was just telling Shuchi our origin story prior to coming on to the webinar, and I want to tell everybody here because it is related to everything you need to know about Shuchi. So I had worked with HP a million times and loved working with HP, and HP brought me to Label Expo in Brussels, and Shuchi had just started working at HP as the worldwide global marketing director. Now, that's the person that pretty much in any company decides whether Deborah Korn is working with them or not working with them. And I was asked to go to an area to meet with Shuchi, and I sat down and Shuchi stared at me for a little while and then said, "So what do you do for HP?" And that was the first thing she said to me. It wasn't, "Hi, my name is Shuchi. Your name is Deborah. I've heard lovely things about you." No, it was, "What do you do for HP?" And I felt confident in what I did for HP and what I helped them to achieve as far as helping them translate their message into something that I thought the printers and the audience could also resonate with coming from me. But what she made me realize was that I didn't have confidence in my ability to communicate that to her, that she would see value in what I did through my words. And from that point on, and through every podcast and conversation we have had since, something happens or Shuchi says something that gets into my head, and I realize it's something that I need to address. And if I do, that it will bring me more confidence and more personal success. And it has in many ways. So I'm so happy that she has agreed to do this presentation. And I hope that everybody out there, if you get just a little tiny little spark of inspiration from Shuchi as far as branding and marketing and messaging and things that are important to customers and consumers, you will take away a big, gigantic prize from it, from a little spark. So thank you so much, Shuchi. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Hi, everybody. So don't let Deborah's story scare you. I'm usually not so scary, and I don't usually not introduce myself. So I am Shuchi Sarkar, and till January this year, I used to be running the global marketing for HP, as Deborah said. Currently, I'm actually had this kind of, let's say, midlife, career, I wouldn't say crisis, but I was like, my daughter's going off to college next year. She's on to new adventures. And I was thinking, what should I be doing for the rest 5 to 7 years of my life that I hope after that I can retire. And so I said, maybe the time was right to actually go to a completely different experience in life. So I went from selling PCs and printers and tech, which has been my background for literally 20 years of my life, to a biotech company. So completely different field, and from a very large legacy Fortune 100 company like HP to a completely new startup who actually launched in August. So they're still somewhat in stealth mode. And therefore, if you hunt for Pure Isolates, you really won't find anything out there because we're still in stealth mode. But it's been an incredible experience. And some of the things that I'll talk to you about today, I think might help because, I feel like sometimes in print, we are always in a startup mode. And by that, I mean that this industry has been around for so long, but has seen many shifts that have happened. Whether it's the advent of digital printing, or whether it's the competition from, social and cloud and all of that. And so there's always a need for us to constantly reinvent printing. And I think that with this COVID, it's another reinvention that printing is going through. So I hope that what I share today will give you some pointers about things that we can do in this world. I think we're all trying to figure it out. So I won't pretend to have all the answers. But over the last 4 or 5 months, as I look at launching a new brand in this COVID 2020 year, some of the things that I have learned, I have observed, I have heard from people who I feel are still continuing to create strong customer relationships in this world where you really have no physical contact with the customer. So the topic that I'm going to talk about today is all about how do you maintain that connection, and how do you still keep relevant in a world where you can actually no longer have any physical contact with your customer. So the world as we knew it, this is a very familiar sight, I'm sure, to anybody in print. Lots of trade shows, lots of booths, lots of people. And this is just one form of it. If you're a consumer company, you see that in terms of a retail store, you see it as a conference, at a convention, you see it even physical meetings with customers when your sales guy goes there, are all the world as we knew it, where people were coming together and were able to talk. And there's a lot to be said about personal connection and being able to understand somebody's body language, or just being able to communicate with them in a one-to-one situation or in a one-to-many situation, but being physical. And so now today, there are no people walking into retail stores, there are no trade shows, no conferences, no sales calls, nothing. And yes, digital and social has been growing in importance for a long time for all marketers. But how do you stand out when now everybody is using those same techniques? Everybody is on Facebook or LinkedIn, or trying to engage their customer with clever content, and everybody's trying to be is trying to stand out in this massive clutter that's suddenly all online, and has actually taken us further into this digital world as we all know it. And so I feel that there are, and I'm not going to spend time talking about 20 things that you could do, but there are 3 things that I find or I have found that our brands are doing today that are going to make a difference as we go along. So before we go into that, let me talk about one amazing brand called Amazon. So, Amazon, yes, there's a lot of bad press. You keep on hearing it. They sent, people back with masks, and, they weren't looking after their workers or whatever. But forget that. Go back to the way Amazon actually created a brand. Amazon never had any physical manifestation. It's now that they may have a bookstore here and there, but they were a brand that was totally built out of no physical contact with their customers ever. It was a completely online brand, and the way the business grew is because of one reason, which is they brought a true innovation to life. Because what Amazon brought to each one of us was so unique, was so much impacting our lives and had a direct benefit to us, that it didn't matter whether you had a physical store or a trade show or something that you saw Amazon on. Just the fact that it was so innovative and had such a direct benefit, that Amazon built a big business and such a strong brand that I don't need to preach about, you all know it. And the interesting thing is that they have gone back to actually set up some physical stores and things, But I feel even if they didn't do that, they would continue to drive this because it is built on a very strong principle, and that is the principle of innovation. And I know we are all marketers here, but amongst us girls, and I can actually say this on this call, frankly, if you have an amazing innovation and if there is such a strong benefit for your customer, yes, marketing is important to tell the story, but really what stands out and what builds the brand is that innovation. And marketing is important, but is not critical. But there are very few brands who really have that true innovation, that have that direct benefit to the customer. And so if you don't have that, and in this very Me Too world, what is going to make you engage your customers and really lead to closing a lead or a sales or whatever? And so I think the first thing that's very important and always has been is content. And everybody always, I mean, last 10 years, this is all we've heard, right? Content is king, content is king. Your content needs to be engaging, it needs to stand out, it needs to be crisp, and it needs to be, you know, everybody talks about the 6-second videos on Facebook or whatever, because, you know, you need to develop content that is separate and different for digital and social. I think today, content is even more important than it was 6 months back. 6 months back, you had many other ways to tell your story, at a retail store or in an event or in some other form. But today, the only way that you have to tell your story is, you know, through a social ad or a banner or a webinar or a podcast or something else like that. And therefore, being really um, creating content that is really engaging to the customer, that resonates with the customer, that has the right messaging that's going to make the customer sit up and think, okay, let me watch this video because, you know, what it's telling me is beneficial for me, is important. I've lived in a time in HP when we used to have brand guidelines that were like 100 pages, and at the end of it you got very templated kind of content. And then I remember along came this guy who I really admired. He's rated as one of the top most 50 creative living persons in marketing, guy called David Roman, who used to be the head of advertising for Apple and then came to head advertising in HP and for the PC business. And I remember he came, I was in Singapore then, and he came and he said, I have only 3 guidelines. And he put up these 3 bullet points. The first said, wow. The second said, a differentiated feature. And the third said, compelling content. So his 3 guidelines were, whatever you do, it has to be wow. The creative has to be wow. You cannot bore a customer into watching your television commercial or reading your ad. At that time, those were the things that were more popular. You should not be talking about a product that has no differentiation story versus its competition. And number 3, whatever you say, it must be said in the most compelling, crisp, and to the point manner. And so I remember from this 100-page guideline, we went to these 3 bullet points. And I go back to that so many times today because I think it's so much more relevant. I mean, what are the ads that you remember today that you have noticed in the last 4 or 5 months? I can bet you they are brands like either Nike or something like Benetton, or in markets where those brands are important, or Coca-Cola. But then let's move to the B2B world. Which are the content that you have noticed in the last 4 months that COVID is happening? And I can tell you, at least for myself, all the B2B brands that I have looked at and the content that I've looked at has been stuff that has caught my attention from the very first image, from the very first sentence, where I've seen a clear benefit standing out for me, whether it's communication from an AI company that's trying to get me to buy the services, or it's a HP or Cisco or anybody else. So I don't want to belabor this point, but I hope you get the point in terms of how more important content is. And then,
Suchi, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you just say those 3 bullet points one more time?
yes, number one is wow. Number two is only talk about a product that has a differentiated product proposition. Number three, communicate your message in the most compelling fashion.
Thank you.
The other thing that I found very important is in terms of messaging. So in today's thing, and this is related to my piece on content earlier, but today, if you see a brand, and I've actually seen this, people still talking about how I'm so great and I will make you look great and I will make you do this and I will do that. And frankly, I am so not interested in those brands, either from a B2B perspective or a consumer perspective. I think you have to understand that people are going through such a tough time today. And whatever you do in terms of your empathy has to come through, that you acknowledge that this is COVID relevant, and that yes, everything does not have to be depressing and thousands of people are dying and we'll never get a vaccine and what will happen to the world. I don't think that's what you should do, because more important than anything right now, to be uplifting, to actually encourage people and build their self-confidence as well as their morale is very important, because the world is going through such a depressive phase anyway. So you shouldn't be negative in your messaging or the way you communicate, but I think it's very important to be empathetic. And so I've seen a lot of printer things on LinkedIn right now, and I see it on my Facebook, I see it on Instagram. And I think all those printing companies that are actually communicating to say that we know this is a tough time, but here's how our communication can help you, whether it's to print masks or to print retail signage, which is relevant to today's world of, outdoor dining and 6 feet and wearing a mask, or whether it is about printing, physical mailers, because that's the way to communicate and catch your customers' attention. I think all those brands that are actually building that messaging and that feeling of empathy are the ones that are standing out. I was noticing an ad from, I think, one of the tech companies in the Bay Area, and they were going on and on about how great they are, how great their technology is, how great their innovation is. And I was thinking to myself, here you are talking about all this, and on the second side there is a big story in how you've laid off so many people, and that you are cutting corners on X or Y. How do you bring these two realities together? And customers are no longer foolish just by telling them that you're a caring company and you're sensitive, but your actions are so much in contrary to that. Doesn't matter. All of you must have read the whole thing on Uber, right? How they fired 3,000 people on a Zoom call. And then I was lucky enough to come across this memo from the head of Airbnb. They did a similar thing as Uber, which is they laid off a lot of people. But what they did, the guy, the genuineness in his tone when he communicated to his employees that he was going to have to let go of people. And he did it 2 days before they announced the WFR, actually a week before. And he said, look, this is not an easy decision for me. I built Airbnb not to be a brand like that, but right now, physically, we cannot afford to have so many people when our business is collapsed. And this is how I'm going to help you. This is the money that we are going to give you. This is the support we are going to give you. And it was done in such a more human manner. If the world ever gets back to traveling and whatever, which I hope so by next year, I love traveling, I'm going to be an Airbnb user for life, because that memo touched my heart. You could see the guy's sincerity in every word that he wrote. And so I think it's not only just about creating the COVID messaging or being relevant in empathy, but I think customers see through your sincerity. Customers see that you are not just being hollow, but actually meaning every word you did. I mean, I don't think I'm a fan for Uber ever, but I don't think it's going to continue in the future. But Airbnb, honestly, they've won my heart with just the way that I read that memo that guy wrote before he did the workforce reduction. So sincerity in your messaging and bringing that alive in a manner that is authentic is very important. And I was having a discussion with an agency yesterday. Since I'm launching a new brand, we are slightly trying to decide what our brand personality is. And I said, for me, authenticity is very important. This is one of the lessons I learned from Antonio. For me, he's one of the best marketers that I've ever come across. He's now, of course, in a tough situation in Facebook, but I learned the value of authenticity from him. And that's very important for me, even if it's a cliche. And sometimes, yes, things are cliched, but just because they're cliched, it doesn't mean that they're not relevant anymore. And so that sincerity, authenticity in your messaging, your actions must happen, even if in all touch points that you communicate. And I think the last thing, which is again very obvious, so I know that I've spoken a lot of things on this call which might be very obvious, are exceeding customer expectations. So really going beyond what is expected. And let me tell you a story that happened with me recently. So I am looking for a sustainable packaging solution for my company. And I reached out to this packaging company that I know from my days in GSP, which is huge. They're huge. And we are going to be very small initially, especially in terms of our volume. And I reached out, and the person who I was connected to immediately responded to me. But what I found beautiful was that even though she realized that we were going to be such a small customer and probably maybe not worth her time, the amount of effort that she took to explain to me all the options I had, where I could get them. She did some research for me. She came back and said, look at these options. Here are 3 people I can introduce you who will probably serve your needs better than I could. And I totally respected that, because I understand that, their scale is slightly different from what I'm looking at, and maybe even the solutions. But the fact that she took all that effort, and the fact that she went into this research, if I ever have the need, I'm probably going to go back to her whenever I have that scale and that size, where I could probably use some of their things. So exceeding customer expectations and going beyond what is expected to really add value, I think is really important today. I was talking to a friend who's heading a networking company, marketing. She's the CMO. And, networking is actually one of the few businesses that is still growing. And that's because people are using a lot of wireless much more than before. And their company was in real doldrums when she actually took over the business. And suddenly, not really lucky, but COVID happened, and the business started seeing a dramatic growth. And she came back and she said, you know what, we were so much down in the doldrums in our brand. And so while networking was going, people were approaching a lot of the standard people, Cisco and Ruckus and this and that. And she said, every customer that they got, they made it a point to exceed 3 steps ahead, so that by sheer word of mouth and the fact that they were doing so much to really help their customers, they slowly started turning deals in their favor, because the word of mouth became so much important for them. And we all know in B2B, ultimately what differentiates us is the word of mouth. How much goodwill do you have? And that goodwill, how much do you stretch it? And the amount of share gain that they've done in the last 2 months has been quite amazing. And it's come because as a company, they consciously said, we're going to exceed our customer expectations in everything we do. And whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's service, whether it's delivery, supply chain, anything. And I think that's really important. That printing company has won my heart, and I will always be loyal to them. And I think, so is this relevant to anybody who is running a business today. So, like I said, I'm not sure all of this is very new, but I've tried to kind of encapsulate what I think are the three things that we need to do really good as marketers right now, which is really be critical of our content and see that it's engaging, it's crisp, it's got a real customer benefit. Number two, the messaging is sincere, it's relevant, it's authentic, it really adds value. And then at third stage, really exceeding our customer expectations at every stage, at every way that we can. Um, so I hope with that, I've given you some perspective of, how we can engage in this world, which is not allowing any physical interaction with your customer, and you're a faceless body to them, but yet you're trying to create an engagement, an interaction, goodwill, brand values. And I think these are some of the ways that I would try, especially in a B2B world like ours.
Shuchi, thank you so much. The chat is on fire. If you don't mind, if you could stop sharing your screen, and then we could bring everybody into the conversation. I have a few thoughts while everybody's gathering theirs, and Jean Pierce is very, very chimey in there. So I think she's got a lot of questions. So probably better just to have her unmute her microphone and ask you. But you mentioned something really interesting before about authenticity. And I've been thinking about this a lot because as we've been moving along, I hear more and more people go, we're in unprecedented times. We're all in this together. Like nobody believes it anymore, to your point. So how is it strictly through copywriting and images that somehow we believe these companies? Or do we really, to prove that authenticity, do we see if they do action after that? Or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. I think, like I mentioned, you have one side, this company that is claiming to be this most sensitive, oh, we are all for our people. And then second side, you have this whole story about them, letting people go with this kind of manner and, all kinds of other actions, which are very contrary to what they've claimed is their corporate position. So I think that it has to be a combination of both. You cannot build a brand on hollowness. So unless there is action and you do have concrete proof points, customers are not idiots anymore, or they never were, but sometimes as marketers, we tend to treat them in that manner. So people do need to know that there is actually some substance, but then how you communicate that substance is really important too. The words you use, the images you build, the tone and manner. Are you coming across as an upstart? Are you coming across as somebody who's arrogant and talking down? Or are you as a brand really coming across as somebody who's a partner, is in this together, and understands the pain? And there is no harm in acknowledging that you're not perfect. I think sometimes brands forget that. Nobody's expecting perfection in these times.
So we focused a lot on COVID and empathy and that, and it just came up in the chat and certainly is related now to Black Lives Matter movement and the social unrest in the United States at the moment. How does all of this fit into addressing that, and do businesses and brands have to address it?
I think so. I mean, one of the most brands that I have consistently admired, and I'm sorry, it's from the CPG world, but it's Nike. And Nike did not wait for Black Lives Matter. I mean, their commercial, right, last year when they did that guy kneeling when had occurred. But in spite of everything that everybody said, Nike actually saw 43% increase in their sales in spite of all that. So today, when they do some of these things, it's in their ethos. It is
Right.
there already in their ethos. Therefore, it's so much more credible and believing. Now, some of the other brands haven't really done it. It doesn't matter that you can't start, that you have to have been a Nike or a Benetton who's been doing that for last God knows how many decades.
Right. Since I've been in college, right?
Correct. You can do that, and you should. If you really believe in it, you should come out as a brand and do it. My point is that don't do it in a manner which is just to position yourself to say, oh, we are there with Black Lives Matter, but have no actions that actually go with what you're claiming. At least have something as a brand that you're doing that says that, we really care, and this is what we're doing to help with the African American community or the cause or all the charities out there or whatever it is that you want to associate yourself with. I mean, there are brands today who are looking at, I was just talking to someone, and they're going to give a free platform to artists from the community, from the African American community, artists, and they're going to provide them with a platform to bring their art across in a manner that they've never done before. And they kind of acknowledged, said, we should probably have done this 15 years earlier, but okay, doesn't matter. We're
Right.
now learning and we're doing this. And I think that's much more genuine.
Yeah.
In the way that they have communicated. So let me not make it all about COVID. The reason why I stressed more about COVID was because we were talking about a contactless world, but Black Lives Matter, and not only just Black Lives Matter, but the whole idea of inclusion and diversity has been a very big thing in corporate, as brands and in corporate America and other places for the last 3 to 5 years that I've at least seen. I've never seen it before that. And I'm an Indian from India, and I've had many cases where I've seen discrimination personally. And so I think it's really important that brands recognize that things like this have happened. Companies recognize that things like this have happened. But then if you want to acknowledge this cause, do it because you really believe in it. It's like sustainability. Sustainability is another thing that everybody's trying to jump on the bandwagon, but you need to be actually doing something towards it and not just paying, lip service.
No, absolutely. I'm just scrolling through the chat. There's lots of comments. Does anybody want to unmute themselves and talk to Shuchi, ask her a question?
Well, since you mentioned me.
Yeah, Jean, go ahead.
Hi, Shuchi. Okay, sorry, fangirl moment. I love Shuchi. We used to work together at HP, and we did the Compact brand. Always amazing to hear your voice. I love the fact that what you talked about a presentation doing, you just did. Right, capturing us short and crisp. It's not paragraphs, right? It's a crisp, sweet thing.
Totally true.
And I think one of the one thing that as we went through, as mentioned, I asked a lot of questions, shocker. But as I think about it, how do you think, as we are approaching this new world, right? How do you make enough contact and not too much contact? Because right now, for myself, right, I've just finished a position at a university. I'm trying to figure out what's my next step. It's not a career crisis, it's a career opportunity. But how do I make the right amount of contact? You talked about that woman who, did some research for you. I'm always concerned, because you know me, that I'm a little overwhelming. So what is that? Is there a sweet spot?
So, a lot of marketing cognitive studies and research has said that the human physiology is attuned to absorb in 3. And so, 3 key selling points, Jean, you're very familiar with this. And that 3 contacts that are spaced out are ideal when you're trying to either make it a sales opportunity or trying to market yourself or trying to market your product. Having said that, I think this is a bit about you having the emotional sensitivity to really understand, should you communicate more or should you communicate less? But I would say 3 is a kind of a sweet spot if you're trying to contact someone, market yourself or your product, but do it spaced out and do it in a manner that 2 things should happen. Number 1, it shouldn't guilt me so much that I get so irritated that I don't want to engage with you anymore. Or secondly, don't do it in a manner that overwhelms me, because so many people today are so overwhelmed that even when they want to get to you, they can't because they just have so much going on. And that's a reality of the world we live in. So I think being cognizant of those 2 things, live with the 3 formula, but then use your emotional intelligence to go up or down.
We have a question about from Shirley about, let me just see. Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask it for her. And this actually comes up a lot. So whether it's related to giving back or supporting Black Lives Matter or supporting any sort of social cause, what is the balance of promoting that and not it coming across that you're actually promoting, look how great we are, we give money back, instead of really communicating the essence of what most people do that for?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, Sherry, this always happens. And that is why you find brands that you consider, oh my God, they're just doing this for posturing. And they're just doing this for claiming to be brands that are empathetic. And I think it's a very tricky thing. And I don't think there's one answer, but here's the way that I look at it. Number 1, I believe there has to be some substance. So if you're doing something, there has to be really something that you're doing. What is it that you're doing? Is it employment? Is it giving back to that community? Is it providing them with a platform? Whatever it is, what is it that you're doing towards that cause? And that needs to be something that has a little bit more substance to it than saying, you know, I just donated to some charity. Yes, that's important, but what else are you doing in terms of, if that is really going to be that big corporate social cause that you're going to associate yourself with? So it needs to have a bit of substance. And then I think the way that you need to do it is not to say, I'm so great, but to acknowledge the fact that, look, this is a problem out there, and this is what we're doing to help address it. And I think if you make that tonality change, which is to move from I am so great to say that, look, this is the issue and this is how we are trying to help this issue, you will find that customers will connect with you much more. And one of the other things that I've kind of used a lot, especially in B2B, is that people are sick of hearing your story from you. So if you can get somebody else to tell your story, if you can get an influencer like Deborah or somebody who's out there blogging, or some customer of yours or somebody else to tell that story, that, look, I went and bought stuff from X printing company because, you know what, they actually are doing this and that's so meaningful and I find that more relevant, you'll find that also helps your relevance of your messaging build much more than if you keep claiming this is what I am. So, you know, I used to drive my sales guys mad in HP trying to get customer success stories. But honestly, having your customer tell your story is the best thing that you can do, much more than you claiming that, or, you know, an influencer or a blogger or somebody else out there. But then, so 3 things: do it with substance, do it in a slightly different tonality, and then get others to tell your story if you can.
And I would also say that, I mean, this is a perfect use for content. You know, why do we support this charity? Why? Here's something we went to, an event we went to with these people, and here's what we learned, and here's who we met. And, you know, you use your social channels to support the things you're supporting. And so that people, to Shuchi's point, can see your authenticity. It's not just we give to the ASPCA and you show a cute little dog there, you are actually going to events and supporting. Reedy has a follow-up and she'd like to ask herself. Go ahead, Reedy. And if you don't mind, could you put yourself on video, please? We have somebody who is hard of hearing on the webinar and does read lips and asked if people can go on video. That would be helpful. Thank you.
I could try, but actually kill the network issue.
It's no problem.
Frequency.
If you can't, don't worry about it. Just if you can, that would be great.
First of all, it's amazing, really amazing to hear Shuchi. And yeah, so I have had the opportunity to work very closely under Shuchi, and I personally have learned so much from her. And I mean, especially through this COVID situation. And yeah, and, like, you know, we have our own struggles as marketers. We come under tremendous pressure, you know, how organizations behave, and now especially in this condition where businesses are actually facing tough situations. I mean, marketers come under great pressure, and I mean, there's a huge pressure to create lots of content, and I mean, engage at a higher frequency with the audience, and that could actually sometimes be negative and could be actually negated by the audience. So I really look forward to understand from Shuchi and have this guidance on how do we actually try to convince our stakeholders, or how to maintain that kind of a level and a balance, because especially like as she mentioned, as Shuchi you mentioned, that everything is going as a clutter on digital right now. So, and yeah, so businesses actually the end customer facing organization people are actually trying to engage more and more with the audience. So yeah, so that's where I would like to have her inputs and a direction, because we as marketeers also need to stand out and stand up to that pressure. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, Reeti.
Yeah,
Great to hear
yeah.
from you.
Really great to see you. Yeah.
Thank you. So
I would
that's
come
this,
on
Reedy.
a video for a minute, but yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So this is
Yeah, same here.
this is a really relevant question, because at the end of the day, as marketers, you know, we are always facing pressure from sales, from product marketing, from countries, region, global, doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
And I think carrying people along on this journey and influencing stakeholders is a big part of what all of us come across every day. I think that there are only, at least in my career, there are three things that I've always tried to do to influence conversations. Number one, try and get as much data and insights as you can. So anything that you help that is backed by data, that is backed by insights, that is backed by examples from other brands or whatever, works. So you know, because otherwise, if you enter into a conversation of your opinion versus mine, then the guy who's senior always wins that conversation. So in whatever limited manner, even if it's doing a quick, you know, communication study or trying to get some data through your agencies or other brands and showcasing what they're doing, always helps. The second thing is, in any conversation, and I used to do this myself, I used to enter into these conversations with a lot of confrontation. Who the hell do you think we are? Marketing is not only about taking orders. I'm not going to do this, etc. And then as I matured in my career and I looked at some fine leaders who are actually influencing people in the organization largely, I felt that one thing that they did was, ultimately the sales guy is under heavy pressure for his numbers too. And so if you can show empathy towards saying that, look, I understand your pressures and I understand your situation. Here's what I can do from a marketing perspective, knowing X, Y, or Z. And that's what I think. Let's go. Let's, you know, we are in this together. And then, you know, go out and do that. And sometimes I think what also works is, and that's the third thing, is actually doing some experimentation, piloting, and optimization. I don't think anybody has 100% the right answers today. And I think unless you experiment, unless you pilot, and some ideas maybe the sales team or the product teams or your own or whatever, but try out, take a small pilot, do it, see the results, and then move on. I think if you're able to do that in a small, cost-effective manner, without spending all your budget on it or a whole bunch of time, And then, you learn, he learn, and that will help you in 10 other conversations going forward, because, you tried a palette and it worked or it didn't. Sometimes it might surprise you as well. So, use data, use the approach of, I understand your situation and this is my recommendation to you. And then thirdly, try a bit of piloting and optimization. I don't think there are any right or wrongs in this world right now. We're all learning
Yeah,
together.
sure. Yeah, just one thing. Thanks a lot for this insight, and I mean, we really miss, especially a leader like you, and we always used to hear from you that I have your back. So really miss you, Shuchi. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, she has been a great inspirational leader for all of us at HP, and she's helped us groom a lot. We've learned a lot, made mistakes. She held us through. Yeah. So yeah, really admire all
I
that.
agree.
Yeah.
She gets
Yeah.
in there, gets in your head. Speaking of
Yep.
getting in your head, Sushi, before everybody leaves, I kind of wanted to pick your brain about something just a little tangential here. Because I always do think it's important, if I have you, to go for my career advice as long as you're here. Um, COVID is really decimating the workforce, as we know, and um, the Girls Who Print group is starting to pay really close attention to who in the workforce is getting reduced and who is not. And we certainly know from the stats in the world that women are getting put out of the workforce. A lot of the jobs that they traditionally hold, hourly jobs, things like that, retail stores, things of that, restaurants, are being downsized. Now, so are companies. With that in mind, and with your top of the pyramid hat on, if I'm going to make a case to somebody like you, why I am imperative to this organization to keep my job and have them focus on somebody else, what are the things that you want to hear from somebody in that pleading their case, so to speak?
Sure. So, when I look at these things, and I'm giving a lot of advice right now to people who have either lost jobs and are looking for jobs, or looking to hang on to their jobs and stuff. And this is what I always say. First of all, understand the challenges your organization is going through. And if you know that, and then you can put across, we are almost like brands, each one of us, right? And the first thing when we build a brand, is we try and understand what are the customer challenges. Where is the customer in his own journey, in his mindset, in his challenges? Think of your organization, your boss, your superiors, your HR people as your customers, and understand their challenges. Where is their head and heart? And if you can understand their challenges and then figure out for yourself, how can you help them meet their challenges? You as a person, you as a professional, the skills that you bring to the table, how can you help them with that? And I think one has to be, and I know that this is slightly not politically correct, but to be honest, you also have to look at all your competition around you, just as the way that you do to a brand. And then you have to say, look, this is how I stand out competitively. That doesn't mean you compare yourself to every other person in the organization. It just means as you tell your story, you point out things that are unique to you. So unique to me is the fact that I've worked in all parts of the globe. I've worked in a country, in a region, in worldwide and global. I worked in B2B and I worked in B2C. And today the world is moving, as I was telling Deborah, from B2B to C. That's the new model that's coming up. So think about your organization, think about the challenges, think about what resonates with those people, and then build your story to say, this is what I bring to the table, and this is what is so unique about me. And you will find that if you have conversations with either your current organization or your prospective employers, some of them where your messaging will resonate will leap to you. There are some people who will say, sure, Shuchi, we understand all this, but you know what? We need only industry expertise, and they will not care for you. And you have to learn to take that failure and rejection in your stride. But some will resonate with the fact that, yes, these are the skills that they feel will help them meet the challenges that they have today and tomorrow. And I think that's what you need to do.
You can literally apply your 3 bullet points to that too, is when you present your case, you wow them with what you add to the organization. You differentiate by stating everything you have done to meet their goals, the things that they care about, and then your compelling content is your story, I imagine. And things like, I haven't taken a vacation day in 2 years, probably aren't as important as people think, right?
No, not at all. I think what matters is, what is the challenge? If it's business development, what have you done to actually grow the business? What ideas you've had that have grown the business? If people are thinking about innovation, and that's the only way to grow in your organization, what have you done? And each one of us is not an engineer or a patent holder, but there are innovations that we have implemented in every part of our business. So, what is that innovation you have bought? How have you done base? What have you done to encourage customer loyalty? Those are the things that are really important to organizations today. How to grow their business, how to bring in innovation, how to build customer loyalty, how to actually manage costs. That's another thing. So if you've been a great, effective way of managing costs and making the buck go longer, talk about that. So there are fundamentally 5 or 6 things, honestly, that every organization is looking at. Can you help me with sales? Can you help me with innovation, customer loyalty, managing my costs, becoming more efficient in my processes, and, therefore any process improvements that you've done? Or lastly, are you a great storyteller in being able to actually help me build my brand and that is becoming more relevant again in today's world. And so any of those things that you have, or unique experience that you have, and when I look at people's resumes, I always tell them, doesn't matter if we're writing a marketing or a sales or whatever, put numbers, put proof points. Doesn't matter if you have 2 things to talk about, but let those 2 things be so strong in terms of the story and the numbers. You don't need to put 20 things. Nobody has the time and attention to actually read 20 things today. The minute I see something that is a long email beyond, 1 paragraph, frankly, I'm like, who has the mindset to actually deal with that? So even if you have 2 points, doesn't matter, but make them substantive, make them with numbers, have some proof points behind what you're saying. And that's what will matter in your resume as well.
Okay, I can't help myself, so I have another one. What is your best advice for women regarding pay equality?
I think that's an ongoing battle, Deborah, in my opinion. I think that the right steps have been taken. The great thing is many women are reaching corporate, headquarters and boardrooms. And I think you will see an evolution on this. I think that we are going through tough times. So honestly, today, if you are without a job and you are getting a job, it doesn't really matter what the salary or the position is, you will take it because you're desperate, because the market today has more supply than demand. But I think that to continue to fight for this cause, and every woman, encourage every other woman to get her to that level, and all of us building this together, whether it's in a corporate headquarter or a boardroom, or doing it for people in our team or in any manner, that's the onus every woman has, to bring every other woman along with her.
Excellent. Did anyone else have a question for Shuchi before? Did you, Tina?
Oh, sorry.
No, I guess that's a no. Okay, well, I can't thank you enough, Shuchi, for joining us today. You have been amazing. Everybody stayed in the chat, in their seat, didn't move. Amazing comments. Everyone, if Shuchi is accepting connections, look for her on LinkedIn. Also, Shuchi, you didn't talk about the company you're currently at. Do you want to mention anything about that? It's kind of cool.
Yeah, sure. So happy to connect with anyone online, offline, LinkedIn, whatever. Deborah has my email. Feel free to get it from her as well. I love helping people because in my life, a lot of people have helped me. So I love paying forward. Anything I can do anytime, feel free to reach me. My current company is a biotech startup. My founder has actually created 2 companies earlier, and the second one he ran as the CEO for 10 years. And so it's in a very exciting space. I can't talk that much about it because we haven't launched, and we will launch in August, but it's a platform which is going to actually revolutionize biomanufacturing in a way. So today there are a lot of things that we get from the plant, but as ingredients that help from cancer treatment to, your beauty products, to weight loss, to food intake, to all kinds of things. And they are not, they're not abundant, or they're very expensive, or, they're not pure because they come from the plant and there's limitation in that manufacturing process. So we are going to be launching a platform that's going to kind of help address that in a very natural and sustainable manner. And so I hope to come and speak to you after our launch in August and tell you more about it.
I'm in on everything and anything Shuchi at all times. Thank you again so much. Thank you to everybody on the webinar. Don't forget to check out girlswhoprint.net for our upcoming Fierce Fabulous Friday events and more, and connect with me and girl number 2, Kelly Malazzi, on LinkedIn. Please join the LinkedIn group if you're not. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and like I said, the LinkedIn group. And thank you everybody so much. Have a great Friday, and power long and prosper, everybody.
Thank you, Deborah. And thank you everybody who joined the call. I really appreciate it. Thank you for giving me your time. And thanks, Deborah.
Of course.